Well, good morning and welcome to Morning Gospel Fuel with Mr. G. It is Wednesday, March 31st, the last day of March. Tomorrow's April already. No joke, but it's Wednesday of Holy Week, meaning tomorrow is Holy Thursday, the beginning of the Easter Triduum. But today, Holy Wednesday, that is oftentimes or can be called Spy Wednesday, because that is whenever Judas secretly turned against Jesus. Um, so that is what we're going to be talking about in today's gospel, which is from Matthew chapter 26, verses 14 through 25. Let's begin in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Then one of the 12, who was called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priest and said, "What are you willing to give me if I hand him over to you?" They paid him 30 pieces of silver, and from that time on he looked for an opportunity to hand him over. On the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the disciples approached Jesus and said, "Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover?" He said, "Go into the city to a certain man and tell him, 'The teacher says, my appointed time draws near. In your house I shall celebrate the Passover with my disciples.'" The disciples then did as Jesus had ordered and prepared the Passover. When it was evening, he reclined at table with the 12, and while they were eating, he said, "Amen, I say to you, one of you will betray me." Deeply distressed at this, they began to say to him, one after another, "Surely it is not I, Lord." He said in reply, "He who has dipped his hand into the dish with me is the one who will betray me. The Son of Man indeed goes, as it is written of him, but woe to that man by whom the Son of Man is betrayed. It would be better for that man if he had never been born." Then Judas, his betrayer, said in reply, "Surely it is not I, Rabbi." He answered, "You have said so." Okay, so as mentioned at the beginning, this is the betrayal by Judas, where we see that Judas and the sin of avarice, which is extreme greed for wealth and material gain, um, comes into play um, in Judas's human weakness, because it's human malice that hands Jesus over um, to the scribes and the Pharisees to put Jesus to death. And if you put this into perspective, Judas is one of the 12 disciples. So what is that? Like 8% of his disciples, which is a substantial amount, turned against Jesus. And he was literally one of the disciples who had seen everything that Jesus did. All the good, all the miracles, all the healings, all the words of wisdom, all this high content, these supernatural experiences, but yet Judas himself turns Jesus in, which just demonstrates just how weak humans are. And you can see that in our culture. Um, you can see it in our families. You can see it in our friends. Because if you just recognize the amount of trust and just serenity and submittance that Jesus has to God the Father, that one of his 12 best friends that has hung out with him literally for 3 years, almost every day, um, is going to turn him over. Like, that's got to be so frustrating to Jesus, and knowing that, but yet he still accepts it of what is about to take place. Um, and again, that's not a bash on Judas, but it's always frustrating whenever people take this small percentage of maybe a priest or religious or somebody who's supposed to be a holy man and chastises them and just kind of sumps it into, uses that whole part to whole fallacy, where if one Catholic priest does something wrong, that means all Catholic priests do something wrong. which is a total fallacy. And so that just because Judas did um, something wrong, we don't claim that all other 11 disciples did something wrong. And that's just a common weakness of our human, um, you know, our limitations that we place on things, but then also how we group things together unfairly, and that's what happens, unfortunately, a lot. And it's again, it's all part of our human nature, due to the fall of Adam and Eve and the malicious deceit of Satan. Um, it is built in our human nature to do evil. That's why faith is so important, because concupiscence gets people every single day. So it's just the reality of the situation. But we see that what Judas did, and what's interesting, again, to put it back in Jesus' perspective of how we're all called to be more Christ-like, is that Jesus himself knew that one of his best friends was going to betray him. He even told them at the table, just as they were about to have the Last Supper, the Lord's Supper, the constitution, and the initiation of the Eucharist. He even told them, and yet Judas still handed him over for a minuscule amount of money, if you compare it to other monetary values at that time. So just that greed and just our human weakness and all that is compounded, which is, again, just the reality of the situation. But it's a call for all of us, and kind of like a challenge and reminder for all of us to accept and humble ourselves in our human weakness, and to truly try to grow in our spiritual maturity, our spiritual knowledge, and our spiritual relationship with God the Father, so that we can treat Judas with love and mercy that even Jesus did in that moment. Because we're all called to be Christ-like, so that can be the challenge today. I'm sure we all have an example or some sort of mini Judas, or somebody who had done us wrong at some point in time in our lives, whether it be a family member or a friend or whoever it might be, and to still treat them with love and for respect of their human dignity made in God's image, because even those who fall into sin in our human weakness, they are still God's children. So that is the challenge for today. God bless. Keep it real. Enjoy our start to the official Easter Triduum beginning tomorrow. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.